Part two of today's presentation is growing crops on the International Space Station. The International Space Station, or ISS, is our national lab for research in space. It's the size of a football field. The mass is over 800,000 pounds, the velocity 17,500 miles per hour, flying at an altitude of 220 miles above Earth, with a power source of 80 kilowatt continuous. This is a unique environment for discovery because the International Space Station removes gravity as a variable in research, which allows the study of underlying mechanisms inaccessible on Earth. As you will see during the presentation, what happens to water in space as an example. The top research priorities of the International Space Station are biosciences, sustainable food production in space, as well as material science and Earth and space observation. And I invite all of you to go on nasa.gov, click on the ISS, and keep up with the latest news from the space station. NASA's veggie production in space. Here to the left is a picture of the veggie grow box, and below is astronaut Stevie Swanson working on the veggie program on the International Space Station for us. Both photos credit NASA. And the big day, NASA made history on August the 10th, 2015, when a crop of outrageous red romaine lettuce was grown in space with Florikan controlled release fertilizer, harvested and eaten by our astronauts. In the next video, Dr. Joya Massa, project scientist, Exploration Research and Technology Programs Office at Kennedy Space Center, presents the veggie program. And we're so proud to have Dr. Joya Massa present this video as part of our presentation.
We've been testing a variety of different crops to grow in veggie. We began with leafy greens, specifically this red romaine lettuce, which was selected because of its small size, its high growth rate, its excellent germination, and also the lettuce has very low natural microbial levels associated with it, so it would be safe for the crew to eat. The astronauts harvested the lettuce that's been growing for 33 days, and the harvest had two parts. First, they harvested some leaves from each plant for consumption, and they had a little bit of a celebration. And then they harvested the rest of the plants for our science. So those plants were harvested into foil and frozen in the -80 freezer on ISS, and they'll be returned to us to do analysis of that tissue. In terms of how safe the food is, we assessed that by first growing a set of lettuce in space and having it returned to Earth last year, where we tested a number of different aspects of that crop. We looked at the food safety of that crop, and we didn't find anything that led us to believe that it wouldn't be safe to eat. To grow enough food, to support the crew takes up a lot of volume in a spacecraft where volume is very expensive and it's limited. We're trying to grow highly productive plants and plants that are a very small stature, and so we select crops that have a very high edible proportion of their yield. This is called the harvest index, the proportion of the edible biomass to the total biomass. For the first crew to Mars, they're probably not going to have a lot of food processing or food preparation equipment, and they may not even have cooking equipment. And that's how it is on the space station right now. They don't actually have an ability to cook any food up there. So all of the food that they're growing is what we call pick and eat. It has to be able to be eaten fresh. So we've been looking at lettuce, other leafy green vegetables, dwarf tomatoes, dwarf peppers, radish, potentially some herbs that can be picked and mixed in with a packaged diet. And we're even starting to look at small fruit crops. We've been testing some dwarf plum trees. But again, these are all things that can be eaten fresh. Once we are established on Mars and we have a long-term base, we may have more equipment to be able to process and cook food. And so then things like sweet potatoes or white potatoes or beans could easily be grown and used to provide food for the diet. So we're testing both types of scenarios, but for now we're concentrating on what could be cooked or what could be picked and eaten without cooking. So we've had a lot of feedback from different crew members who were on the space station during the first veggie test and also during the second test where they were allowed to eat the produce. In the first test, I think the crew actually really wanted to eat the lettuce, but they were good. They sent it all back to us. But the consensus was that we need to be growing more vegetables in space station, that they really want to grow things that they can eat more than ornamental crops, and that this is something that the different astronauts really couldn't imagine going for longer or farther into space without having this little slice of Earth there to remind them of home. They all really enjoyed the first harvest of lettuce. All the astronauts and cosmonauts were around watching and taking photographs. And we had numerous comments and photos throughout the growth cycle about how much they enjoyed watching the plants grow and helping to mark the passage of time. In this grow out, again, we had a lot of really positive feedback from the crew. Basically, they were all there for the harvest except the Russian cosmonauts who were out on an extravehicular activity. And the astronauts saved some of the lettuce for the cosmonauts to eat for when they finished their EVA, which was really wonderful. When they ate the first batch of lettuce, their comments were very supportive and enthusiastic, and they seemed to really enjoy it. So that just made me feel wonderful that I was able to help be part of a team that could provide them with such a source of enjoyment. One thing we really hope is that the crew will be able to pick which types of plants that they want to grow in the future. So we're working to develop a crew garden mentality where they can select which crops that they'll want to grow and then eat them. So we have, a lot of steps to get through to get there, but I don't see any roadblocks in the way.
Thank you, Dr. Massa, for that video introduction to the veggie program. So students, what did Dr. Massa say? How many days to grow lettuce in space? How many? 33 days. How many of you are home gardeners? How long does it take to grow lettuce in your home garden? 60 days? 90 days? The 33 days is a groundbreaking achievement of a very quick result from seed to grow lettuce in space. And it has strong, widespread, positive implications for growing vegetables on Earth. Well, the NASA veggie production team had to overcome challenges. Think about it. What's different growing veggies in space from growing veggies on Earth? You can look at the answers, but think about it. What's different? There's no gravity in space. We only have microgravity, if that. Without gravity, water will float. No soil is allowed in space, so we have to use a media that's inert. The nutrients will change without gravity, and the roots will go in all different directions, again without gravity. And finally, there's no light. No gravity, no light, water floating, no soil, roots going in different directions. What challenges to grow veggies in space? Later we will show you a video of how we did it. One of the challenges was the impact of microgravity on water. Here's Commander Chris Hadfield demonstrating what happens to water in space without gravity.
What happens? I'll get up close so you can see here. Oh, there's one ball of water floating around. I'll put it on the washcloth. Okay, so here's a soaking wet washcloth. Get the microphone so you can hear me while I'm talking. And now let's start wringing it out. It's really wet. It's becoming a tube of water. It's becoming a tube of water. It looks very cool. The water's running up my hands a little bit. Hey, Tom, can you come grab me a towel, please? I got one on the wall. It's over here by Sivas. So it'd be on the other side of Sivas there, stuck in the wall. So the water's all over my hands. In fact, it wrings out of the cloth into my hands. And if I let go of the cloth carefully, the water sort of has it stick to my hand. The surface tension of the water keeps it stuck to my hand. Thanks, Tom. Grab the microphone. Okay, so the experiment worked beautifully. And the answer to the question is the water squeezes out of the cloth, and then because of the surface tension of the water, it actually runs along the surface of the cloth and then up into my hand, almost like you had Jello on your hands or gel on your hand, and it'll just stay there. Wonderful moisturizer on my hands. And the cloth doesn't really unravel itself. It just stays there floating like a dog's chew toy, soaking wet. Great experiment, worked perfectly. Meredith and Kendra, congratulations, great idea.
In dealing with the challenges that we discussed, the veggie system creates light. Blue and red wavelengths are the minimum needed to get good plant growth and are the most efficient in terms of electrical power conversion. There's a picture of the blue and red wavelengths creating this pinkish light. That's the light that's used in veggie. Media, as we discussed, no soil is allowed in space. Therefore, silica clay is used, which has two characteristics that are very important. First is totally inert. Secondly, it has a high CEC for efficient nutrient uptake. CEC stands for cation exchange capacity, which is the total capacity of a growing medium to provide essential nutrient uptake. And another interesting point, silica clay, which is used as the media in space on the ISS, was also found to be in large quantity on the planet Mars, which means we can grow vegetables on Mars in the silica clay as we work with it on the space station. Finally, the water, which is floating in space. The water is injected into a veggie plant pillow with the water underneath the root systems. The roots are now configured downwards in plant pillows following the water. What a brilliant, brilliant achievement. And of course, Florikan controlled release fertilizer optimizes plant nutrition in the encapsulation technology you see there, where all the nutrients are coded for controlled release. There are so many new, exciting technologies in use on the International Space Station. We spoke about the light. What about the water? Well, the water on the International Space Station is recycled through a distillation filtration system, which removes urine waste byproducts. 85% of the water from urine on the International Space Station is recovered for potable water for the crew. Imagine, the crew doesn't waste any water, and their urine is recycled through a distillation filtration system and is then safe for the astronauts to drink. Our veggie space plant biology uses potable water from this ISS system. On Earth, sewage dumping into our lakes and rivers is a major environmental issue. On the space station, NASA Kennedy Space Center has invented an ammonia recovery system. Urea, or excrement, has to go through a process where the urea, which is human excrement or animal excrement, will become ammoniacal nitrogen, or NH4, those of you who are chemistry science students. The NH4 then becomes NO3, which is nitrate nitrogen, which is what the plant uses. So the key is, if you want to have clean water, you have to deal with the urea excrement. And what NASA has developed is a state-of-the-art ammonia recapture system. The ammonia, nitrogen, is captured from wastewater. It is recycled for later use, perhaps as a fertilizer, and a regeneration of the captured media for reuse in the system. With this system, classic wastewater pollution is not generated into our lakes and rivers, since the ammonia would be recovered and not turned into a waste product, but into a reusable product. We hope someday to see this ammonia recovery system at all of our water treatment plants throughout the United States. It is available for licensing. Now let's discuss Florikan controlled release fertilizer. This is the engineering of encapsulation technology. Specialized coatings which encapsulate nutrients, which optimizes plant nutrition and reduces environmental impact. Florikan controlled release fertilizer is a certified space educational product. It also was recognized with the Gulf Guardian Award by the United States Environmental Protection Agency, and the Gulf Guardian program was awarded to Florikan as an award for our environmental leadership in 2008. What Florikan learned as a NASA spinoff was from the Space Alliance Technology Outreach Program, or SATOP. And SATOP suggested to use a polymer with a tortured path and to inject a release agent which created a controlled nutrient release. Moisture enters through the tortured path and then by reverse osmosis seeks a way through. Once inside the prill under the polymer, it builds pressure inside the prill. The pressure sends the nutrients out to the skin of the prill, and the complexity or the layers of the path of controlled release determines the release. This technology also received the National Society of Professional Engineers Most Innovative New Product Award in 2005 from the National Society of Professional Engineers. And this was our second. The veggie program has successfully grown 8 different crops of leafy green vegetables grown on the International Space Station by the veggie team with Florikan controlled release fertilizer. I bet none of you knew that. 8 different crops of vegetables grown on the space station. And to be very frank, the veggie species selection to grow in space must have reliable and quick germination. You know, the red romaine lettuce took 33 days from seed only. It has to produce a high edible biomass, so there's plenty of food for the astronauts. Low microbial potential means the plant's just not going to get sick. And high antioxidants, so the plant is so healthy for our astronauts to enjoy. The 8 crops grown on the International Space Station were outrageous red romaine lettuce, the first crop, dragoon lettuce, or green bib lettuce, Waldman's lettuce is a green loose leaf, Chinese cabbage called Tokyo Bacana, wasabi mustard green, pak choi extra dwarf, mizuna mustard green, and a red Russian kale. These 8 crops have been successfully grown in space. The picture of the red romaine lettuce, outrageous red romaine lettuce, is to the right under the veggie logo. That was our first crop in space. And remember, all of these crops were grown with dealing with the 6 challenges to grow veggies in space. No gravity, no light, water float, no soil, nutrients are changing, and the roots are confused. These 6 challenges were overcome by the veggie team. And here's how we did it.
Historic vegetable moment on the space station, presented by Science at NASA. On August 10th, astronauts on the International Space Station sampled their first space-grown salad and pronounced it good. They were treated to freshly harvested red romaine lettuce grown in the veggie plant growth chamber, a special structure designed to make gardens flourish in weightlessness. On Earth, garden flora battles such foes as cutworms, aphids, slugs, root maggots, blights, and rots. But weightlessness is one thing no earthly vegetation encounters. In a weightless environment, there is no up and down, so roots grow in all directions. Water and substrate, the materials used to anchor these plants and allow for root growth, tend to float away. With veggie, these problems are solved by using plant pillows, bags of substrate with space dirt and controlled release fertilizer. Wicks are implanted in the bags to draw water into the substrate and provide a place to glue the seeds, which are oriented so roots will grow down into the substrate and shoots that emerge will push out of the bag. LEDs furnish light for photosynthesis and give the shoots a sense of direction so they keep growing upward. The walls of the veggie chamber can expand to make room for the growing crop. According to astronaut Scott Kelly's taste buds, this special space-tailored arrangement works.
Tastes good?
Yeah, I like that.
Kind of like arugula.
Yeah, it's fresh, that's all.
He explains the importance of growing such culinary delights in space. If we're going to Mars someday, there's going to be a long period of time where we're going to have to be self-sufficient, and having the ability for us to grow our own food is a big step in that direction. The astronauts celebrated this historic vegetable moment by toasting their lettuce leaves and shouting, "Cheers!" Before long, they'll be toasting cabbage, tomatoes, and more. The next SpaceX delivery will supply some of the seeds. We will be sending up seeds for a small cabbage that is very highly rated for flavor and additional red romaine lettuce, says Joy Amasa, veggie payload scientist at Kennedy Space Center. We are working on crop selection with dwarf tomatoes and dwarf peppers. Upcoming experiments will use various ratios of red and blue lights and different fertilizers in attempts to improve crop yield, nutrition, and flavor both on Earth and in space. Other botanical treats are planned for the astronauts as well. We have additional seeds on board the station, says Massa. These are zinnias, really pretty daisy-like flowers that help us understand longer duration growing plants that have to flower in space, such as tomato. That kind of enjoyment is expected to be an important added bonus to veggie. I think the psychological benefit of growing plants in space will be incalculable, she says. Having living plants can help with stress and increase the crew's enjoyment. Growing plants can provide the sights, smells, and tastes of Earth. Fresh produce could add a variety and interest to the diet, and the textures of fresh vegetables, crunchy, juicy, could add a new dimension to the packaged diet. Scottish poet Alexander Smith said it best. How deeply seated in the human heart is the liking for gardens and gardening. Apparently, the same is true of human hearts in space. For more from the International Space Station, go to www.nasa.gov/station. For more nutritious news from Earth orbit and beyond, stay tuned to science.nasa.gov.